Hey, what's up? I'm gonna tap in with another video, and on this one, I want to say, with this video, I want to enter this one in truth, and I want to stand with all people who have ever fought for a cause, and the greatest cause being truth, and the truth in any cause is the greatest part of any cause. So the greatest cause have been truth, and so I think, and that's what I want to stand. That's what I want to enter this with, and I want to stand with and ask anyone who's ever stood on truth to stand with me in this. But I was thinking about something today. Is I made a video. This is now the third part. I'm gonna go ahead and say this is the third part of a series now, and it started where I was making a video a few days ago. Comically, I had bumped into I was using a guitar, a new guitar that I had that was electric, and I'll practice guitar like in public spaces, like say a city bus, or a coffee shop, or even a library. Like how many people do you know would practice a guitar inside of a library without making a disturbance? And that's because you can actually practice a guitar better without making noise. That's to fret the instrument and make your own exercise to train your fingers independent the one from the other, where your more difficult passes in the I bumped into like a scientist in New Mexico. New Mexico's like there's a lot of science in New Mexico. I was at a guitar shop in New Mexico, and I bumped into a scientist, and he had a successful career as a scientist and had raised a family successfully, was currently then on the odds and on the outs with his own spouse after raising their children to adulthood successfully, and him being successful because he had a calling for music. I recognize a lot of his calling because the very passions that he had in the sense, the whims and the senses and the aspiration and the intuition and the sniff at harmony and expression that he would be confounded by within himself. That's what spurred me to want to be an artist when I was working as a delivery driver, some maybe about 10 years ago, or between 10 and 12 years ago, where I was already in my late 20s then. But like me then, he then now didn't know what to do with that. And so he was at a guitar store, having somewhat estranged himself from his very family, and already being successful, landed, not knowing how to proceed with his with what he's sensing of his talent, and having more meaning to him then in his late years, as much as anyone at any point in life could be inspired by something, but not knowing how to go about that. But even him, as a very scientist, he couldn't play next to nothing of a lick of anything on guitar. And that would be my case if I hadn't come across a brilliant teacher. But that too, after many goals with different teachers and expending resource on learning. And a lot of the resources I expended, it didn't in itself require that, but that was part of the path that would amount to me having the background, but have the sustained interest over time to connect with a great man and teacher. So even something like playing an instrument like a guitar, it can be actually more difficult than what a near about rocket science could appreciate, if one were to come at it in the traditional venues, I think. And I think that the same thing that frees you can bind you, and same thing that bind you can free you. So many of the very resources and initiatives to ostensibly train and sustain and spur interest in music and musicians, future musicians, are the very modes and methods of stifling people. And even the great teacher, the man that I met who inspired me, had I not already had an interest in the instrument, some of the daunting challenges of sustaining my opportunity with him, and then sustaining that after having yet failed with him, and also sustaining something of just a little bit of less than enthusiastic commentary, where we're all yet humans. I couldn't have actually sustained the failure within him to go past him to actually get the essence, but he did yet give me his undivided attention and sincere respect and engagement. Because although I wasn't doing the best at all, always with the actual level of opportunity that I had meeting this man, at that time a published, and in the process of publishing further literature for some of your fine universities in the East Coast, in a very simple book. I'm referring to Mom Silla Alexandra, my guitar teacher. It took me a while to really catch on the knack of what he was communicating to me, but it was somewhere within the attention that he was giving me, the time in his minimalist apartment, that his style and manner of being of manhood and being a man, and in his creativity, but also his efficiency, where he dispensed with anything that wasn't useful in his communication and in his life, and especially music. It got me way on past where I could have been, but the main part of which would be to train the fingers independently and to trust your ear, because he wasn't concerned. He wasn't intending for me as much as he had any influence to for me to be lingering around him, or for me to be repeating guitar um, uh, copy and music that wouldn't be original to me. And I think that even to cover music, for a long time I didn't actually appreciate the value in covering music and what it means to cover music. But I still think that to create original music in the first place is the best way to cover anything, because that's where you really become familiar with your voice, and you can be confident in your voice and know the difference between your voice and anything that would cover. And there's always going to be something of a coalescing and a divergence in what you cover, and part of the divergence is to cover things well, and part of the coalescing is to cover things well, but that too while being confident enough and understanding where you veer from what you're covering. But I had to get on with him with that. But otherwise, the instrument would be, because it would be very difficult to appreciate anything of the music. Like, oh, play me a this chord, play me a that card. It's gonna be damn well very difficult, especially when you get onto like bar this and that, if you hadn't been approaching it from the finger independence in the first place, where a lot of things can be like child's play. So what can be more difficult than rocket scientist to a rocket scientist can be more simple than child's play to a child or to an adult. After taking a different approach, and for me that had been getting on with the classical teacher, but really seeing the difference between like covering something between what's that man's method and mode of the guitar, what the guitar is to that man and with that man and from that man, but also myself different. And then I sometimes, even as a nubile student, I could see the difference in what he would suggest and what I would conceive, and it wasn't always stronger what he would suggest and what I could conceive once I discovered a knack for my own creativity. But that too, I had met a man who had been maimed as a young man in a heinous incident being ran off the road, and he had developed himself into a state class bodybuilder, and that too a self-styled, self-taught guitar teacher, a guitar player, never having learned anything of music other than to appreciate a lot of your blues players, your delta players as like real pioneers, and also that they likely, according to him, would have discovered or transcribed a lick of some kind, and that was your inroad into accessing the instrument and to start to see patterns. And the major part would be seeing patterns. The lick had been the first pattern that they discovered, whether it involves chords or arpeggios. Some form of lick would be the first access of patterns on the instrument that would be unique if it really spoke to you and compelled to you, and it made you a little bit proud to show it off. That's actually the instrument right there, is that pattern that would be there, but it don't stop there. So I told someone recently is that the difference to me between a professional class of anything, but especially like a guitar, would be that an amateur would say, I hope I may become proficient within, or I hope I may be improve within, if I'm serious and earnest, I hope I may improve within 5 years. To a professional tier person, you're compelled by the wonder of the instrument more so than when you picked it up, and each time you pick it up, and you hope that maybe, hopefully, but also you have faith that if I'm sincere, if I pick up this instrument, I may become better within 5 minutes. I may be a different player within 5 minutes, or discover something new within 5 minutes that's as compelling and more creative than anything I had come to this point, where I'm maybe appreciably a professional at the professional tier. I yet look forward to the next 5 minutes and what I won't discover in the next 5 minutes, or the last minute before I have to do something different. And so but I wanted to say to enter this one with truth, and to stand on truth like that. But I was thinking of something. So in the last video, I was improvising about, I had met a man recently who said that when he saw me fretting the instrument and practicing in public like that, he said that, there's something called an iRig, and if you plug that into your guitar, you can put it to your amp, to your smartphone, and you can broadcast yourself in a public venue. Like, say if you were over the road, or you were like improvising your own gig somewhere. That's really sounds like rock and roll to someone. And I had just procured that instrument recently then, and I was asking the people there, is there anything that go with a smartphone, or like a simple way to like have an amp? And they're like, F if I know. They're very people at a store like that, a guitar store. But here go this brother, he was an IT person just taking lunch somewhere, but he told me about that, and that was the move right there. But then when I was improvising on when I was riffing on that comically about that happening to me, I got on to talking about a smoke shop, and then riffing on that a couple days before Halloween, and then there's a famous there's a now recent but also famous atrocity of the son of an influential person in Los Angeles that was assassinated in front of a smoke shop, whether anonymously or not. I don't know the context there, but it made me think a little bit about gang banging, because that man, his father is on now, but not outside of the life, and that person was young but still an adult. And I was thinking, like, what is it so, like, people know what gang banging is, right? Everybody knows gang banging is serious. Now you go outside, and I want to stand on truth with this and ask people to just to rock with this just for the sake of truth with this, and that's no more that I mean with this is truth. So we know gang banging is serious, beyond serious than a person can imagine is gang banging. But so can be driving in a car, so can be walking down the street to pick up your car and get clipped by someone turning a corner that wasn't paying attention. So can be getting on a date and you don't know what that person is mixed into, or so can be pissing off the wrong person that also doesn't otherwise have a history, or also so can be some of more heinous things that we don't know from different lifestyles in the rural areas or different countries and stuff like that. Anything can be heinous in anything, but gang banging is uniquely compelling. What is one thing that would make gang banging very, very serious, way beyond serious, but very serious? I think what makes gang banging mean gang banging is that gang banging skirts the age of majority. Is that interesting? Is that interesting? If you have someone that's part of a gang banging lifestyle, they likely, near about guarantee, everyone that knows anything about American culture, that would seem like they know. Sometimes it's funny. Like, I went to a not funny, but I went to like a workout studio recently, far the hell away from anywhere I would have any proper business being. Not that I don't have proper business being there, but it was a little bit past some of these bases that I would work at. And in that base, I went yet further into that area because I was looking for a means to bleach my hair at that point. And there's a salon out there that would do that. My stylist recommended that down, and they also recommended that down and commended my stylist for doing so, because bleach can be very harsh on your hair. That's what they would appreciate, these very women at a salon. But when I went there, I went into a workout studio just for. I had another synchronicity take place on that time. I was doing something about I was referencing the goat. I was making a conversation in the parking lot about goat this, goat that, referring to like Eminem and your great some of your great people named Mike that would play basketball. And there go a shop right there, something 23. So I go in there, and then damn if I didn't once had known someone that I saw there. Then there are these people in there bumping music, and it's like very well-to-do people, like what you would call yuppie, for lack of a better word. That's like petty bourgeoisie is called yuppie. People that they're at least getting some of the cream of what's possible for civilians and people without landed wealth, but like upper middle class, different stratas of middle class, or the input, or what could be amount to middle class, would be there, and they're listening to some real ass drill ass music up in there, and they're familiar with the words, and they're comfortable with that stuff, even as it's referencing real modes and trends of mayhem, massacre, and murder. And I'm not gonna act like I don't listen to some of that same music, but you think, damn, at least like some people that I might not have to be ducking from would be people like this, but they're also on with that shit because it's catchy too. But so that these lifestyles they're not new to anyone. And a lot of people that you wouldn't think would know about things would be more familiar than that. But everybody know what big homie mean, right? And everybody, if you grew up in the hood, you probably had something that reminds you a little bit of a big homie, right? Now, mentors are not unique to life, but mentors in things that can maybe skirt or be outside of the law in a heavily litigated society as ours is, that would be a profound section of the society, but also the type of mores and ethics that would be part of that, because nothing is beyond ethics, not even crime is beyond ethics. But it's a different iteration, and it hurts a lot of people. But the big homie thing, people know about the big homie. But what that means is that I think that some of what makes gang banging is because of the big homie, little homie thing. Because if you're involved in a lifestyle, if you're mixing business between the age of majority, right, children and adults being on about the same business somehow, that is, children that could get themselves in trouble around adults, but also adults that could get themselves in trouble around children, which could make either one were a child to get in trouble around an adult, that could get the child in trouble with adults, or other children who are also around adults that could be violent. Then if adults get themselves in trouble around children, that could get themselves around other adults and children that would be in trouble with other adults and children that are in with adults. So when you blur the line of majority like that, the age of consent majority, as like a crime life would go, that actually makes crime more than crime. Because like when I was a kid, like I had some run-ins back then. I didn't actually know how things work. Like I actually had some things that nothing profound, just kid stuff like in school, but that stuff could have been way the hell worse. And it maybe in this time that would have been worse, or even then it could have been worse, and I didn't understand that. So we have different graces, and sometimes you don't know how close you did or didn't come to different things. But I don't know, I'm just talking about like kids being kids, like in lunchrooms and classrooms and stuff like that as I go. But and I want to say thank God that whatever I had going on wasn't worse, and commendation for whoever I was in smoke with. They didn't take that there, because I had actually been in smoke with people that were more that didn't show their hand as much as people would think, but also could work with different hands different than people think. Even though I worked with my hands there too, but I wasn't meaning harm. And for me, it was more so like self-defense. Because if someone actually touched your physical body somehow, at that point it's physical defense, especially if someone come up and fuck with your back, if someone slams something into your back and you defend yourself, is that not self-defense? But I still say it would have been better to just walk away. If I had a Duke, and I would walk away. But then I wasn't seasoned enough, and I grew up around the same tropes and the same nonsense, in the same pretensions as people might have, to think that violence is an answer, because it really is not an answer. Because the only thing violence does is go up and away in my beautiful balloon. But more so, the hot part of that is that violence only escalates, and you can go from sticks, you can go from mean mugs to nuclear war pretty quickly, and that wouldn't also be the end of it, because now we have like Space Force and beyond, and probably interdimensional this and that, and CERN, and colliding different isotopes and atoms and electrons, and also a harp. But angels don't play this harp, and we can affect weather patterns on people ass and make droughts and stuff like that. And also we can do chemical engineering, and also we have Fort Detrick, where we may have remixed rather pig material rather than monkey material, to give you some of your original biological warfare around the time of the Vietnam War, that also exploded into what would become different pandemics in the 80s and are still maiming people. And then also some of the technological apparatus in terms of communicating sophistically and being where we wouldn't be anticipated to be, and having intelligence to really do injury and mayhem and massacre and ambush in times of formerly the radio, but then the digital thing. And then that digital thing was overlaid, and from the Vietnam from the Southeast Asia conflict into modern iterations where we now have digitalism, that is to exactly harness and mitigate a different opportunity and to the forms of advantage, and have a very skewed and a lopsided outcomes that can do even much more damage, mayhem, suffering, and abuse than any other form of anything, including different economic systems and caste systems that might be called different things connotatively, or denote different forms of economic disparity, such as indenture this and that, such as share this and that, such as different things referring to the histories of Slavic people, overlaid onto the current iteration, which are equally as atrocious and painful in human suffering. And all that can start very simple like that. But so things escalate, and I don't think that violence is the answer. But that was still kiddo stuff for me, because that was just more so, even though they were I was having smoke with upperclassmen. I was not a freshman, but I was having problems were given to me by upperclassmen, and them too trained, because I was having contention with different people who were trained for fighting. And so sometimes when you think about all this fighting stuff, like, it's so cool, like, oh, I got my kids in the this and that, and the doodle in the, I'm not even saying the doodle, but in the judo, and the muay this, and the Brazilian this and that, and then we're taking them to karate, and then we're doing. But did you ever think they may actually apply some of that training that's now military training you're giving a child? Did you think that maybe they weren't still children? They may still be naive enough, or actually put some of that, or have an itch to put some of that on other students that may not be trained like that, or may, if their parents might have different purposes, they may have different purposes for their own health and feeling of being safe, like in the school and stuff like that. Did you think that that military stuff might not come all the way around to do damage in the very school system? And I'm not even talking about with like sophisticated weapons and stuff like that. I'm just talking about with the did you know once you do that training, your hand is now a weapon. Your hand is now a lethal weapon. You actually can't put your hand on people when you, so certain different people like with different licenses, they can't do things like say a boxer, they can't lay hands on people the way they normally can as an adult because they're now a boxer. There's heavier repercussions. But did you think that some of these yet minors that have different forms of training might put that on other people? So that happened for me, but I didn't get the worst. I actually didn't get the worst of it, even because I had trained myself in basketball. Mommy and daddy weren't really giving a damn about what I had going on, so I trained myself in basketball. And when push came to shove, it wasn't the first time that I stood toe to toe with someone. I had been standing toe to toe, like, because I was always looking for a competition in basketball. If I had 5-on-5, that was luxury. That was up on the east side. I don't say east side, but that was moving on up to the Hamptons. If I had me a full court game like that, that was the shit I was looking for. But until then, I had to do it any other person I'll put in front of me to give me a little bit of competition, because you have an itch for competition when you're young. But that had just been about basketball, and I wasn't really some of my friends were wrestlers, but at that time there are always stories about like people getting like disabled wrestling and stuff. So that wrestling, like hugging up on, I didn't see the purpose of wrestling when I was young, because there was much too much contact with boys at that time. I was never cool with just touching boys like that as a boy for wrestling. That wasn't my thing like that. And I also didn't want to get like maimed off it. It's not really that cool to me, the wrestling stuff, but I didn't really want to get maimed like that or just be touching boys like that. But that shit does work, because my friend was as good as basketball as me. He was good at any sport as me, but he also did wrestling like from a young age. And he loved me so much that one time we were playing baseball, and I came into home and I tripped over him, and I was ready to swing on him. I actually tried to swing on him. My best friend, I loved him, he loved me, but I was ready to swing on him like that because I had a little bit of a temper when I was young. And all he did was put me in this lock until I calmed down, because he didn't want to hurt me. That's how much command and control he had with a little bit of wrestling training, but also he was a sturdy dude. But he loved me enough, but also he wouldn't have very much difficulty subduing me with a little bit of seasoning with wrestling training like that. But then you see the purpose of things. As an adult, wrestling actually looks cooler to me as an adult. All those things I mentioned, they look cooler to me as an adult because you can see the purpose. But a child can't always see that. But these people I would have contention with as a young person would be either like trained fighters, or have also other friends that were trained fighters and also that older than me, where like the distinction, human beings develop like in jumps. So even the distinction between the next grade up, that's a lot of development as as like socially and like physically. So I'm just saying that sometimes the chickens come all the way home to roost, and it doesn't mean that someone get the worst of it, but things can be serious very quickly. But that was yet among other minors there. But in gangbanging itself, is specifically and very, you can't, is that lifestyle goes, and the things that would be involved with that and the different supplies, you can't get past ambivalence around the Asian majority. So it's actually interesting that they say that when people are incarcerated, that they would like check one another paperwork, like you have to know what you're there to be incarcerated for. And a lot of people say that anything against minors, that women and minors, but especially women minors, but not the least of which a minor woman or female, would be about the most egregious thing that can send a person to prison. But if you think about it, a lot of prisons, they have like they have people who are members of different things. But I've learned that sometimes people, they're not granted access to, they're not always necessarily granted access to membership in different organizations just because they're incarcerated. And the ones that would be appreciated as being members of something were so before they were incarcerated. But I'm not saying that's verbatim. I can't speak to that. But that's what I've discovered that on different learning venues and different learning venues. I've learned that there's a distinction between someone that would become initiated while incarcerated and one who had been initiated prior to being incarcerated, and the more reputable would be initiated prior to being incarcerated. But if you were to actually be initiated prior to being incarcerated, it's interesting that most organizations, I think, that would be reputable street organizations, the membership wouldn't be limited to adults, and the more season of which would have also been minors before they were involved in that, but they wouldn't have had the real seasoning training or access to different things that go with the lifestyle, whether it's substance or equipment, without some form of cooperation with adults. And then so that actually does blur the lines of the Asian majority, the way that people are punished while incarcerated for blurring those lines. But then if you think about it, because if you think about like what does it mean for a young person to be involved in that lifestyle, they would have to have some cooperation in interest. An older person would have to have interest in them to do that, to teach them how to be effective with that. But then if a person is beyond the age, because it's interesting, like I don't mean to speak about like tribal things, because I think that human beings have had to have boundaries. We've had communities and we've had to have boundaries, and in order to establish boundaries in communities, you need group cohesion and teamwork. That not the least of which, and not all the way different than fighting. And so, but where that would begin, it wouldn't necessarily start past. I'm not saying that gang banging is wrong, because I'm not saying that gang banging is wrong in itself. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that gang banging is wrong because because it can't help. It would implicitly have to redefine or work around the hard stop age of consent, majority 18, as that's appreciated on both sides of the law. Most people on both sides of the law feel a way about the Asian majority 18, even though that's handed by the very, for lack of a better word, powers that be, that is those that would have the strongest organization around the means of production, would have also handed us a lot of our atrocities and the disparity that implicates the cycles that are involved around gang banging and all forms of disparity in life, economically being the foundation of that. Even though the very perpetrators of the worst crimes, the realest of crimes, have come from the very same interests that would define and spell the Asian majority, which there's a little bit of ambivalence with that in license or greenway. There's a little bit of discretion, I think, between the different states about how the Asian majority is appreciated, but by and large, it's 18 for the Asian majority. I think there is such a thing called emancipated minor. I don't know what that means. I've heard of other states saying the age of consent can be 17. I don't know what that means is that in my state. And then I also know that there's a distinction between 18, draftable, can purchase tobacco, and then 21 is the age of where one can consume alcohol, and I think THC. And then I think also some fields like CDL, like I've done school bus, I think that would require you to be on to 21. And I think that it's been appreciated that the prefrontal cortex of the human mind is developing at least until age 25. And I noticed some vast distinctions in myself at the latter ages of adolescence, all the way from 16 to all the way to 25. Vast distinctions in my own development, but then also that contrasted with people who would be little to more significantly older than me, and I had been developing that whole time. So I'm nothing of the person I was just a few years ago, even in my very latter 30s now. But that had been the way all the way through. So you can really say the mind is developing that whole time. But where and how where one actually becomes cognizant is insignificant. And I know that it's also been appreciated that people that are beyond, but are young, sometimes they're appreciated as not entirely knowing the finality of life. I think part of that's because like young people are very romantic. I was more and more romantic the younger and younger I was. I still have something of romance, because you can't get past, you can't, how I grew up, man. I grew up at a romantic time. So I can't not be romantic, but not the way I was. But I think an 18-year-old, they're not so naive as to think that death doesn't mean death in bad news, that death doesn't mean death. I don't think young people are so naive as to not think death means death, because they've been seeing death. But sometimes they may not know that death may also mean a lack of romance, in that you may never even know you had been born by the time that you would pass away, because what would there be of you to remember having been here? That's a deep thing like that. But you see a young person, that might be what's really traumatic about war, is not only passing away, but you see someone that young, like damn well maybe 20 or less, like 18, 19, 20. You see someone like that pass away right in front of you, or slowly over a few days, someone had passed away like that. God damn, that person is gone. and you know what final means when you see someone that young, that alive, because you're most alive before you pass away. So how alive are you when you're that young and you just passed away? That's crazy, like that. And then for it to be over like politics, or we don't know exactly what we're fighting for all the time, even when we ostensibly know what we're fighting for or what it means to fight and live and die. We don't know that because we're still understanding that as we live. But that's also part of the part about being young and what is majority, because that's really heinous when young people, very young people, pass away, but also when older people put them up to that. So it's not just gang banging that where you got older people putting people up to stuff. Our whole life we got politicians, but then in times past we would have even some of our own family members, influential people that have already lived a life, are putting us up to something that would put us more extended. And that may be the human way that honey, we just gotta tell you, honey, this is the way it's always been, honey, and so this is what it's gotta do, and these are the facts of life, and that's how it go. Older people, they get the best of things after they've already had more of the best of things, and they're gonna put us up to it because they got the senior. Like I had a job as a city bus driver, and it was so egregious how they put the rookies up to the worst roles, like the improvising fill-in roles that you really would need some more seasoning just to know how the routes go, how the pay system works, the fare system works, the ins and outs of one route. Do you a couple routes before you put that fool on the fill-in. But no, man, we need to put the rookies on the fill-in type time like that. And they're also already on probation, so they got it harder, but they also can't be messing up like that because they only got so many strikes on probation. But then if they get long enough past that, then they get to be a big dog and they sit back like the vac cat and they let the rookie go and risk their whole livelihood and everybody depending on them on that shit before they had time to learn that shit. Because that's how the way it is, baby. I get paid, baby, and gotta get on to my vacation thing, baby, while you working that shift like that. And but you gotta cut your teeth somewhere. You gotta learn that shit. You gotta learn the road somewhere. So if it ain't rough, it ain't right. P-Rock told us, but damn, sometimes that shit don't even work. Sometimes it don't even make sense, man. Because why are we putting all the passengers that also got to get to work on time in risk of not getting there because that fool have been learning that because the veterans got to get on the seniority time. But I'm not saying that, I'm not mocking like the lifestyle of game bang, because that's something that I can't speak to that. But what I'm saying is that it would necessitate a little bit of an ambivalence between crossing the lines of majority and less than majority, especially as you're introducing crime and the rigors and demands of a criminal lifestyle, which that can be more rigorous, and you can have more of I don't mean to say coercion, but you can have you can have honor and loyal and duty that'll have a person doing what they never thought they could, what they can't do, what's impossible with the actual the parameters of society. It may be impossible to succeed in from certain positions. You can't do certain things from certain positions. Try as you may, you can't do a push up off your back. But if you got to do something crazy because you met someone that was already knowing you about to have to do something crazy for knowing them, that can be very probably worse than anything a person can do, is to do something you don't want to do, as it's not in your interest or the people you love or even the people you're doing it for. But the thing is that it does look strange sometimes when you see like an adult that, like they say that according to King Noble, you can't not be what you are. So if you were ever living an extreme enough of a lifestyle to be officially a gang member, that may be something about you that can't easily change unless you would have something more potent come in. And I don't know anything that's been successful in reforming that other than faith. And the faith with the most track record of doing that is Islam. Islam has the strongest track record of true fundamental reform. And I think that even some of the reform in other faiths like Christianity that I come up under, seeing people reform from criminal lifestyles, I think what's viable in that has been replicated something from the Nation of Islam, if we're honest. The Nation of Islam is Islam, but that too, the Nation of Islam has successfully and convincingly and thoroughly reformed people, and it means as strong and tough as anything is the street life. I can appreciate that as a layman bystander in American society, and thank God for anyone that would reform from anything and make themselves and others better, because we all ships rise together and we all suffer together until we do better, and they have the track record for that. So I want to commend and honor the Nation of Islam with that. Also, that too, there's an offshoot of that named Clarence 13X with the Nation of Gods and Earths in the New York area, that it coalesced with some of the emergence of hip hop. And that man, Clarence 13X, made statements that a human being, a man that is is comprised of is a microcosm of the macrocosm, and anything that would constitute anything in the macrocosm is attendant in a human being. And sometimes you really don't know how much power you have in your body. Like, imagine someone manipulating an airplane or a motorcycle, how formidable and beautiful that is, or heaven forbid, a weapon of some kind, how larger than life that is. A human being can do that. How much you can and can't do with your opposing, with your hand, baby, with your opposable thumb, is incredible. They would say hand-eye coordination, but you think about your eyes. Your eyes can access and appreciate any degree or many degrees of beautiful light. Your ears can do that too. Sound maybe being a finer man. All the senses may actually be different iterations of. They would say vibration, but it would actually be light. I think different senses are light, and it actually, without any improvisation, without any amendment, without any appendages, artifices combined to the human body can appreciate light. It can use its hand to manipulate within its environment based upon light, and the hand can respond. The hand actually responds to the eyes, such as to be connected of completely. So the eyes can access this light. The senses can access this world without much mediation, but also the hands and the body will respond to the senses without much mediation to appreciate that the hands maybe are an iteration of light itself. I see the light. You see the hand. That is the hand. The hand is that you don't sometimes appreciate how much you have with your hand and your body and your mind. The biggest treasure that you have and you may have is you. You can go to school for anything, right? I had a teacher once say that when you study like, say you were to study the human body, which is one of the great things you can study, you actually don't need a cheat sheet or anything, because that had been you the whole time. But if you actually understand what gift you are the most gifted when you are a bucky naked boy or girl or woman, man. When you bucky naked, that's the best that have been making you. That what you is the bucky naked like that, and you don't need more than the bucky naked. Cause anything you do in the bucky naked, you kind of compensate. Cause I already been happy with the bucky naked, so we can walk bucky naked. We can talk bucky naked. We can sing bucky naked. We can dance bucky naked. We can play a little old instrument bucky naked. We can do damn near anything bucky naked. That's what doing bucky naked. Even making a little old another button just like us, that be bucky naked, and it ain't gotta be much better than the bucky naked to be the rock and roll. And I don't know too much thing better than the rock and roll. And you even got something better than the rock and roll. You probably playing the rock and roll. You up there in the aeroplane up there. But what do you want up there? Man, you need to bring you some rock and roll, cause it might be a little bit boring up there in the rock and roll. And you get the momo thing like that. The momo good to go, but the sound is a little bit boring like that. In the long trip right there, you can get the rocky roll, and even you got the nice thing, the SUV thing, the comfort thing, the leather thing, the warm heated seat thing, and put your feet on the warm floor. Take your shoe off the warm floor. Gotta eat the floor. Ooh, your feet in the warm. It's cold outside, but I'm warm. Pack some food in my warm thing with the bucket. But you might be falling asleep and keep your bored a little bit if you ain't got the beat to go with them the rock and roll. Again, we need the rock and roll, but it shouldn't take much more than a bucket naked to get that rock and roll. So, but the game banging, it may be more serious and also ratchet as the most. And I don't even say ratchet derogatory, but as in, like, you know, when you're going on a roll. Oh, we're about to put you on a roll coaster. Hold on, we need you're going on level 4. It had got ratchet. It's a whole nother level when you get ratchet up like that. Hold up. Okay, you're good to go. It got ratchet like that. So I'm saying the game banging lifestyle is maybe that's beyond extreme. But it may also do because you're mixing business, at least between adults and children. So that's a lot like that. Business in the first place. So sometimes when you see an adult that's on in years, that's part of a gang banging lifestyle, but even sometimes you look at military too, it's similar like that. But it would actually be a little bit unique, is that if you're an adult that has survived to adulthood and you're participating in a gang banging lifestyle by choice, what incentive would you have to be? Because according to Arthur Avalon, a man does nothing without incentive. So think about this: a man does nothing without some form of incentive. That's what's been said by Arthur Avalon, is that the biologists would say that a woman won't entertain an interaction if they can't perceive an advantage, to derive an advantage. That's been said by biologists. But it's been said by Arthur Avalon is that a man doesn't do anything without a form of incentive. And according to Tony Gaskins, the main incentive is for a man is to procuring resources, because that's what men are composed with. But I would say that even the purpose of procuring resources is for entertaining and um uh for what's the word I'm looking for? Flattering female women. That is to impress a woman. That's why men are concerned with women, flattering women, impressing women, but also compensation money in the first place for that to flatter women. But if your lifestyle requires you to mix business with children, that's what we're saying, children less than 18. So you need to mix business with children in order to gain means of livelihood, that is money, but you also use the money to impress to flatter females if you're still male, largely, or if you're maybe a woman that's with males that also have the standpoint of a male. But if you're comfortable mixing business with children in order to gain money, would you not also be comfortable mixing money with children to gain what money gives you? Or would you not also be interested in gaining what money gives you from children? If you gain the money from the children or from cooperation with the children, would you not also spend the money with the children and in cooperation with the children? That is impress the female children. That is, if it had been that seamless like that. Or would it? So if you were to be gang banging as an adult, would it be for the money? And if it's for the money, is that to impress adults only? And if you don't have any bones about risking the welfare of children to get the money, would you not also have any bones about spending the money with the children and also impressing the children and the female children if it had been a male? Or would it be for the drugs themselves? But more so, I think a lot of people take drugs because they don't feel cool enough without them. The reason you take that much alcohol is because you convinced yourself with it. You were convinced that you felt cool with it. But I think it kind of nullifies being cool because you're damaging your health. And there's nothing cool about losing your health. There is nothing cool about compromising your health. Then, if it would, so it'd be either for the money or the drugs. Some people would say the respect, but respect is not very far away from money and not very viable without money. Because I remember I watched, there's a person named Casanova, a rapper, and he made some actually sturdy, brilliant comments on an interview, and he actually paid his freedom for that interview, because I think he was incarcerated off of what he stated there, like with the RICO. But he said that when he's with the toughs, with being certified tough, he said it doesn't do him much better when he goes to the bank, and so he doesn't think it's entirely worth it if it doesn't translate into like tangible advantage like currency. So if it were even about respect, the money wouldn't be different. But if it was about the money, that too, with the cooperation of children and putting children in jeopardy, would it not also be seamless to spend it at least around, if not on behalf of children, if that's what it's about? So I just want to say that the thing about gangbanging, it's a deeper thing about engaging children than it would seem, and that might be what's actually going on. So the interest in the lifestyle, gangbanging lifestyle, it might be the convergence of enticing young people, children, to do the bidding of adults and get some of the advantages that come from being adults. That is what adults would have access to, or even seasoning around for the children. But then also for the adults, it would be the advantage of putting the children up to things that they wouldn't know better than, but then also getting the benefits of that, which may also be redeemable, if not on behalf of, at least around children also. So that's a deeper thing about what may be going on with gangbanging, but make it really also very like a high ratchet of extremeness, is that it's a lot about mixing the business of adults and children, but the main business of anything for human beings is like reproduction and like in romance. What moves you more than the right incentive, and what's the right incentive beyond something beautiful, right? So it's interesting that if you'd be incarcerated for mixing adult and children business, that would be heinous. But also it wouldn't be unique to be incarcerated as a gang member or become a gang member. And that exactly lifestyle has a lot to do with the transcending the line of majority. So I'm not passing judgment with this, but just for understanding and saying that what this really is more so saying is that what does it mean, the age of majority? Because I don't think that gang banging is new to the American. I don't think what we call gang banging is anything new at all. I think that it's been around for a long time. And so that might be something of what it is human, like the tribalism of that. But the lifestyle of that we now know as gangbanging, that might be really what tribal life is. A lot of it, very reminiscent of that, and it has to do with communities, making communities viable, and also protecting communities, which is part of making economics viable, which is part of making households viable, which is part of making lives peaceful, no less. So what I'm saying is that I'm just putting a nuanced conversation, is that what's interesting is that there's no really hard, fast line to anything. Life is a spectrum, but also development is a spectrum. So some of the what's ratchet is a high degree of craziness about gangbanging. It might not just be the gangbanging itself, but it might be the parameters that it's taking place in. That is the rules of the society, because the rules of the society are to ensure advantage. I'll say that. Laws are to ensure advantage. That's why they're always changing. Laws are not about right and wrong, because law in itself, it's conveyed upon philosophy. It's a form of law is a form of philosophy that is like ethic, harmony within dealings, and which impacts, reverberates back and forth through nature, which we're still part of nature the whole time. And so there's real implication of harmonics in anything we do. You can't get on with anything without being harmonic. I can't pick up an instrument and play anywhere, anyhow, at any time. As romantic as an instrument is, I can't do that without being harmonious in it. And even when I'm being shut up and quiet with an instrument in a public space, that's a form of harmony right there, to be viable somewhere. So I'm just saying that but most people don't give a damn about philosophy, not the least of which lawyers or people that get on with laws don't give a damn about philosophy. I'll say that most lawyers, for all their pretenses, don't give a damn about philosophy proper. Because if you're a lawyer, you're a law student, and I say, you could say maybe some people might appreciate that commentary I made on this channel would be more insightful or as deep as something that would be philosophical. Like I had the video prior to this, I actually introduced a semantic discussion that's along the lines of philosophy. I said a cloudy day. Cloud just went from a noun to like a diminutive, I think, with the E like that, to, I think that's a gerund article, to use the word cloud, a noun, as an adjective to describe another noun, day. But also day can be appreciated as a verb in that it's actually it's a flowing thing that's active. And if it were stationary, it wouldn't be called a day, because a day implies a day implies dawn, daylight, noontime, afternoon, evening, sundown, twilight. I think that's a day. And so if it weren't part of, if those weren't all at imminent and at play, it wouldn't be what's called a day. So it's not stationary, even though it's taking place within, for according to Arthur Avalon, anything that moves, motion, it has a static component, that the greater part of which being static, that allows the motion. So for us to have the sensation of a day, it's taking place within a substratum of existence that's more so stationary, and can be called like it can be less than and more than what's called a day. And it gives the opportunity for the sensation of a day, because as I'm making this now after nightfall, it's yet bright time, daytime hours in other parts of the world. So from my relative position, it would be night. From their position, to be day. But from a yet broader perspective, it would be more transcendent and arbitrary to call it either day or night. But it would probably perceive as night, because existence is more so, I think, black. Although there's so much light that we can't comprehend how much light there is neither. But it's a lot of things, they overlap in the spectrum, and such as day and night, such as time and space itself, overlap and transcend one the other, and make any verbal statement arbitrary. But so that would be semantics there, but nobody could give a damn about that, not the least of which a law student on their way to a fine school, because it's more so about what opportunity comes from the degree in the learning, and that is amounts to a form of advantage in a punitive, punishing society, because you can't even get nowhere off a cold ass street in the middle of the night as a human being, based on your intrinsic value, without something to cough up that is like fiat currency, but that amounts to advantage. So in that system, I think some of what makes things very difficult is the actual laws at play that come into lifestyle. Because a lot of people that I knew, people when I was young, that I knew a lot of different people when I grew up, but I think a lot of people weren't out to harm people and F people over, even people that were different, that stood for different things. People weren't out to do that, but they were part of a lifestyle, and that lifestyle, it got to be paid for somehow. And then by it getting paid for, that's where your conflict comes in, because you're part of the lifestyle, you can't go over here and apply for a job. One, because you can't stand still somewhere that long, but two, you may no longer be viable because you've been in this lifestyle long enough. But you still got habits to pay for, and also that too, food and things like that. Because we're men now, we still need, we're men and women now about to be, and we still need, or are, and we still need to pay for things like, because we can't get beyond that. So you might do the thing good at, that you're close to, that this and that, but you can only do that in this space, and then you go over there and you bump into that, or you do that good enough, and other people also can't do nothing different or better necessarily as soon as to move you off of something. So there's your conflict there, and what would spur off of that would be very complicated. But then they also say that if you go to a lot of, so you say that some of your most violent places in the United States, they're attended by a lot of gang activity, a lot of it. But then also some of those very places, it would be said that if you really were to break down what's happening, what people are fighting and dying and killing over, it has to do with romantic things. You'd have like girlfriends and boyfriends getting mad about things, but you don't actually appreciate that. You would appreciate that as different, right? So this place has gang activity. This place also has a lot of murder, mayhem, and suffering. And a lot of that murder, mayhem, suffering is also about romantic interests. But you don't appreciate that the romantic interests are also part of the gang business, because the gang business is about money, and money is about impressing or being viable in relationships. So that's what a lot of money is about, because you do it for your family, or to have a family, or to impress what could be your family. But then if you're missing the business of adults and children, you're also it's not very far away from mixing like the romance of adults and children. So that's a lot of your mayhem. And then the gang activity, it may be actually just to bolster and support the lifestyle. But what are we doing in life other than partying? That is having sex and having cool things to do around and leading up to and after sex that take money. And so you could almost say that what's so impressive, what's so profound about gang banging is that it's mixing the business, at least, of adults and children, and even as that's maybe criminal. But what do we do anything for anything without an incentive? And what's the greater incentive than sex that we know of? Nothing other than rock and roll, I know, which is not different entirely than sex, is rock and roll. It's a form of sex. So even if you were doing classical music, that's still a form of sex, combining and transcending and coalescing and contrasting self and other. So you could almost say that the gang banging is an actual apparatus to facilitate having sex, to be able to pay for a lifestyle that is not very far away from, or much more other than having sex, or paying for what comes after sex, even if that's a family. I'm not saying that that's worthless. I'm not by any means saying that having sex is worthless or having a family is worthless. To the contrary, that's the thing to live for and die for, I think. But just to appreciate that the gang banging is supporting that, and so that would incentivize someone like an adult to be interested in that lifestyle, that they're interested in that lifestyle. But it does have to do with children like that. So you could almost say this entire thing it's to facilitate lifestyles around sex. But that's not human, and that's not unique or less than anything. But it's just that our society is so difficult, is that we can't be humans anymore without going through a lot of hell and suffering to get around the law. And I'm not trying to advocate to change the law of majority, but I'm just saying laws in itself, as they affix and guarantee disparity, discrepancy in outcomes and advantage. That's what the real monster. There's a person called Monster Cody Scott. He was I don't mean to take his name lightly, because he was a real person from that lifestyle, and he's an example. If you read his book, he was being courted and schooled and seasoned by people older than him, not necessarily already adults, but enough for intensive purposes to be as much of a differential as though he were dealing with an adult. And I think that it wasn't always exactly clear where he stopped being a child, where he started injuring other child and adults, and then where he became an adult and he stopped injuring other adults and children. That was his story, Monster Cody Scott. But I'm saying that's still a human being. That tribalism, human beings, stuff like that, fighting, dying, suffering, love making, all that's human. But the actual laws to guarantee disadvantage, and then what people would have to do to exist within that and get around that and beyond that and live and die around that and beyond that and from that, and because of that, that's what the monster is. So the monster is a discrepancy in in economic realities, and all that would stem from that. Even those lifestyles stem from that, the economic disparity, and that's fail-safe, guaranteed, insured by the laws themselves that skew things. And that's so the police have no other business than to guarantee that the laws continue to function, because it's law enforcement. It's not justice. Yeah, protect and serve business as usual. That's what the police are there to do. Protect and serve business as usual. Peace officers to keep business peaceful. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to throw nothing up with that. I'm just itching my eye. But but police are not there to ensure justice. They're there to ensure business as usual, which is partly addressing discrepancies in business dealings. Which, when another person is injured, people don't appreciate that when you're born, like in the United States, you're actually a part of the government. There's different betting and value and vouchers that are redeemable and are being redeemed so soon as you are being born. A lot of it has to do with like maritime stuff, like law according to Tashik Bay is land, air, and water. And when you exist in the United States is a naval occupation. The United States, the geographical region of the United States, is a naval occupation in the first place, and had not ceased to be a naval operation in the first place, nautical that is, upon the seas. It wouldn't have been viable without the seas, but also the laws that mitigate maritime activity, business and fighting, but in the first place and last place, business. It's still upon the lines of like maritime stuff. There's a person named Jordan Maxwell, I think he talks about that. And so when a person is existing, when you're contracting anything, when I'm uploading this video, when I'm doing a deal with anything, when I'm sitting on my ass somewhere, anywhere, but where I would get to sit my ass somewhere, it has to do with the transacting of business. And I'm my own business, as all people are their own business. But it's a lot of it's bogus and corrupt, and it's already been monopolized since before I had an opportunity to know what the hell had happened. And that's upon the lines of your very birth certificate. And Tashik Bey would talk way more deeper about that in your inheritance, in your endowment as a human being. And according to, in a venue of law, that is land, air, and water, you have no viability there or protection there other than your membership in a human family, which is your connection to this life, but also that your inheritance and your right standing somewhere. So when they're mocking black people in the United States, the word black it's a little bit arbitrary as a connotative structure. It can be reasoned because I think according to Tashik Bey, you're actually referring to white when you say that. Like Blake is a German word and it refers to like white spots, Blake spots. So you're saying Blake, that's redundant statement according to Tashik Bey, but also connotative because you're saying something, you're overlaying something on a person that's different than what the etymology refers to. Some people, they contend whether words really are intended as connotative or denotative. Because I read a book on poetry that says that all language is actually connotative because it stems from metaphors. Like this thing is like this thing, so it's called this thing because it's like that thing. So that's metaphor. To say one thing is or as another is metaphor. But so you could say that's connotative, but then it's so connotative so long as that it's to be denotative. And so there can be, when you say something connotative, right, you can imbue the language with different meaning than inflection than what you're actually saying. And you can bypass without coming all the way out and saying what you intend to say, what you're actually saying. You can say one thing without saying it, or say it differently by introducing connotation, and that can amount to an injury according to Tashik Bey. So according to Tashik Bey, venues of what's called slavery, even slavery itself is connotative. Venues of what are called slavery was only tolerated by a slave would be connotative statements. So if I'm on here speaking connotative, or if I'm anywhere speaking connotative as a person of color, color means less than sovereign in legal terms. If I'm speaking, it is in bogus, alienable, is an alien person, that is a person outside of a nationhood, is what you're saying with colored, but it also